My name is Ryan Jensen, and I am a current article editor as well as a symposium editor, and have worked with Ethan and the rest of the editorial board on this symposium. And we're just so excited. It's been such a success so far, and we're just so glad to see each and every single one of you here today. We're going to begin this afternoon with a game warden panel focused on the real Joe Pickett. We got one former chief game warden, one current chief game warden, and a wildlife biologist here, which I will go into depth on a little bit more in a moment. But we are super excited to have them here. As I just said, we've discussed a lot about legal issues raised by Joe Pickett himself, and now we're going to talk to the real Joe Pickett about all of those. So first, I would like to introduce Rick King, who's on the far end there. Rick King is the former chief game warden of the state of Wyoming, beginning his career with Wyoming's Game and Fish Department in 1998. During his time with the department, he was the recipient of numerous awards, including the Director's Award in 2019 for many efforts, namely his work on chronic wasting disease, the ongoing process of developing an elk feed ground management plan, and general high-caliber interactions with the Wyoming State Legislature. Our next panelist, Dan Smith, earned his bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and worked as a game warden in Arizona for a time before returning to Wyoming and joining Wyoming Game and Fish. Mr. Smith served as a game warden, regional access coordinator, and then regional wildlife supervisor up in Cody before accepting the position as the new chief of wildlife and chief game warden for Wyoming Game and Fish. Our final panelist, Martin Hicks, in the middle, started as a biologist with Wyoming Game and Fish Department and then became a wildlife coordinator supervising other biologists. Today, Mr. Hicks is the deputy chief of the wildlife division of Wyoming Game and Fish. We are extremely grateful to have all three of these individuals here today with us as we explore these issues. As a reminder, this panel will also have a Q&A section at the end, so feel free to submit questions via Slido, or again, we'll also just do an audience Q&A and run around with the mic, or if we decide just to talk out loud, we can do that too. So, and the QR code is just going to be up on the screen there, or some tables, not all of them, but most tables will have a QR code for you to scan. Just feel free to ask any questions that you may have. So, with all of that said, we're going to get our second half of the symposium underway. So, to start off, and this question is for all three of you, could you take us through your average day at Wyoming Game and Fish? What issues and situations may fall under your jurisdiction that people may not realize fall under your jurisdiction? Just feel free to start.
Well, I hope it's okay. I'm going to take that out of the mic stand because otherwise I'm going to feel like I'm leaning forward the entire time. And I want to thank Ryan for introducing me by my real name, and I want to thank Mr. Box for making me be known at my church as Joe Pickett. I don't think the lady at church knows my real name. Every Sunday she sees me, she says, "Hi, Joe. Did you arrest anybody this week?" So, an average day for a game warden it's one of the greatest jobs ever because there is no average day. Every day is different. We don't have the lifestyle of Joe Pickett because he has more excitement in one book than we have in a career. I don't get handcuffed to my steering wheel ever. I don't run off the road too many times. And so it's a lot more laid back, but I greatly appreciate the excitement that he's made for us. But, a day could start out similar to today. It's hunting season right now, and that's why you get the chief game wardens and not the real game wardens, because they're out working. And so, Martin started out in the field this morning and then came to do this. I'm starting here, and then I'm going out to work a check station this afternoon, and I'll probably look for elk hunters tonight. So every day is different, and part of our job is doing law enforcement, but a lot of our job is public relations, with hunters and with anglers, or working with landowners, educating people as well as enforcing the law. So every day is a little bit different. Some days you get woke up in the middle of the night to go take care of an injured animal, and some days you get to sleep a little later and work late at night. So every day is a little bit different. So some of the duties, if I think I got Ryan's question right, some of the things that you might not expect that we do, we get called out in the middle of the night a lot of times because of injured wildlife on the road, and a lot of times game wardens get pretty tired of having to do that. Wyoming statute says that only a game warden can be putting an animal down, so a lot of times we have to use a lot of discretion because as a person who drives by on the road and sees an injured animal, they want to do the right thing too, and so we use some discretion there. But we do take that job, we take those calls in the middle of the night and have to go do that. We don't enforce drug law or traffic law or anything else. We are strictly game and fish law, and so we focus our time and our effort on managing the state's wildlife and enforcing those laws. And so I won't drone on and on. I'll turn it over to these other guys to fill in where I missed out.
Good afternoon. Yes, Ryan, thank you for having me. And Mr. Box, thank you for all the questions I get. Have I read the latest Joe Pickett novel? Yes, and they're all very good. Thank you. They need more biologists, by the way. In there, so. I'll talk about a daily life in a wildlife biologist. What's really unique about Wyoming is how we manage our wildlife species. It's not just in the hands of the biologists. We work very closely with the game wardens day in and day out. Other states do not do that. Other states, law enforcement is strictly law enforcement, and the biologists do not get that help for the data collection needs that we use to determine what our populations are doing, so we can determine what kind of harvest we could put out there. How many hunters can we put out there on an annual basis? So that's one thing very unique about Wyoming Game Fish Department that I really appreciate and have come to realize that it's unique. And the people we bring in to be game wardens or biologists appreciate that as well, because we can get a lot more work done. So the day in the life of a biologist is in the fall right now. Yeah, we're checking a lot of hunters. I was at a check station this morning helping out some local field folks. We have elk seasons open, and then tonight I'll make my way home in a green truck, checking, seeing what elk harvest is like. And our main jobs is to collect data. We have no enforcement ability at all. We're strictly there to gather data, analyze that data, determine what the populations are doing, and then set seasons, hunting seasons, based on what that data is telling us. And so the only time we can ever do anything law enforcement is when we have a check station. By statute, we can set up a check station, and we have the ability to ask for licenses at that time. Otherwise, out in the field, we have no authority at all, but we wear a red shirt. We drive a green pickup, and everybody assumes a wildlife biologist is a game warden. That's just a fact. So most of the times, guys are getting their licenses out before we even say hello. So, but yeah, I don't want to take any more time. Rick?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this, and I thought, well, a day in the life of a retired game warden is a little different than this. I have to get up and tend to my free-range chicken herd and other activities, but these guys described it really well. And one thing I did want to point out and thank Mr. Box for is his description of the day-to-day life of a Wyoming game warden. It's really clear that he has spent 25 years or more talking and interacting with state game wardens and really learning what the job entails and what the lifestyle is like. His books really capture what it is to be a Wyoming game warden, and it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. I was thinking about it, it's kind of like, if you work for the fire department, you work these 48 or 72-hour shifts where you live at the fire hall for that amount of time and then you go home. But being a district game warden in Wyoming is like being at the fire station 24/7, 365. And Mr. Box in his novels captures that essence really well, and I appreciate that because I think it helps provide a lot of folks who might otherwise have no clue what a game warden does. It really has helped shape people's opinions and gives an accurate portrayal of the life of a game warden. There was a quote in one of your books, Wolfpack, where you talk about the rhythm of the life of a game warden and how you move from season to season and activity to activity, and that's a very accurate description. I appreciate that, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight. The next question that I wanted to ask you guys is, what drove you to decide to pursue to becoming a game warden, or in Martin's case, a wildlife biologist? What moral and ethical responsibilities do you believe are most fulfilled in this career?
Well, I'll take that first. Really, to be very frank, I didn't want a desk job. I wanted to work outside, and I had a passion for wildlife that was kind of hard to explain. My parents were not really avid outdoors folks, but they provided lots of opportunities for me to participate in outdoor adventures, and wildlife was just a passion of mine from a very young age, and I knew that I wanted a job that I loved, and luckily I had parents that encouraged that. I think they wondered really what I was going to do with a wildlife degree and how I was going to make a living with a wildlife degree, but they said, hey, go for it, that's your passion. And initially the job really was just about something that was fun for me, that I had a passion for, but over the course of my career, I really developed a passion for the service side of the job and providing a public service and serving others. That became an important part and a very rewarding part of the work for me. The motto at Game and Fish is conserving wildlife and serving people, and those two core components became really deeply embedded in what I did and really provided a lot of gratification for me in the job.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to be until I was a junior in college. So I know I wanted to be outside. I was blessed to have a father that was a high school science teacher. I grew up in Wheatland, Wyoming, and at that time, we still have the services today, but we have our Sebille Research Unit, or Thorne Williams Wildlife Research Unit. At that time, they would take students, and he would take his high school students out there, and you can have a tour of the place. And so my dad took me, and I was like 6 or 7 years old. I got to sneak away from school, and that just thoroughly fascinated me, that you've got these captive animals, they're doing research projects on them, they're wild, and I wondered, how can I be more in that? And then I forgot about that for a long time. But he also had a passion of getting me in the outdoors. And his passion was fishing, so we did a lot of fly fishing. My father was a Vietnam vet and did not want to hunt, but he certainly took every opportunity to take me hunting. And from those two passions, that just I wanted to be in the outdoors as much as I can. And then through college, I was like, well, what am I going to do now? I was going to be a biology teacher just like my dad. And then I finally figured out, oh, wow, University of Wyoming has a wildlife program. It's one of the best in the nation. I'm going to try to go down that route. And long story short, the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And if you make a first good impression and willing to put in the work, you can achieve things that you probably wouldn't do otherwise. And so I met a lot of good people, and I got to know them, and I was blessed to finally get hired by the department in 2002, and it's been a blessing. It's been a great career. Couldn't ask for a better career.
Yeah, and I guess I'll make the third saying we all love the outdoors and grew up doing things in the outdoors. And I actually started college in the electrical engineering degree here at the University of Wyoming, and thought my life was going to be in a cubicle. And one day I was walking through the library downstairs where there used to be a bowling alley in the basement, for those of you who remember way back, and there was a flyer there that said, you could become a game warden. And I was married at the time, and my wife thought she was marrying an engineer and was going to live a life of luxury. And I went home and said, I changed my degree today. I'm going to be a game warden. Because that's all I've really wanted to ever do, and I didn't realize you could go to college and do that. And then, so initially it was just like, it's a way to spend time outside, it's a way to, you're going to get to hunt and fish every day, and that's really not what happens. You find out that once you become a game warden, that hunting and fishing really becomes a challenge because you're always working. But like Rick said, you grow into this career where first you start out and it's just the excitement of working with wildlife and doing things outdoors, and you get to be the guy that everybody calls because if it's wildlife related, the game warden gets called. But over time, it really becomes a passion for what can I do to make sure that wildlife still has a place in the state of Wyoming going into the future? Where can I have some impact on wildlife? And then that service to people that Rick brought up. It's like, how can we help bring other people alongside and have that passion for wildlife so that they care about it too, moving forward. So all of us kind of started with that love of the outdoors, and then all of us kind of grew into this, it's such a bigger thing than just a job.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to note about the bowling alley and the library idea. I love that idea. I think we should have one in our basement at the law school. That'd be great.
Used to be a bowling class. I took it.
Bowling, beautiful. That's awesome. Awesome. So kind of in that same vein, I wanted to ask, where do you believe that your duty lies in your profession? Is it towards the wildlife that you protect and research? Or is it to more of like a legal framework, such as the system that protects them? Or is it something else entirely? Just where do you think that that general day-to-day duty lies at the end of the day?
I'll start from a non-law enforcement viewpoint. At the end of the day, if I can say I did something good for wildlife, I feel like I accomplished something. And that doesn't happen every day, obviously, but that is my goal. I want my grandkids to be able to enjoy what I've been able and blessed to enjoy. And so my challenge is to make sure we have those habitat, those open spaces, which are shrinking every year. I don't care what state you're from, they're shrinking. And I need to make sure I'm doing my job, that there is some landscapes out there still 50 years from now where we can still hunt pronghorn, where we can still chase elk. So my goal is I'm looking at the resource, trying to do what's best for the resource, because I know it's something that Wyoming is blessed to have. We have a strong heritage that partake in viewing, hunting, whatever, anything tied to wildlife. That's how we derive a lot of our income for the state. So at the end of the day, if I can say I did something good for wildlife, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah, I think, just to echo what Martin said, I think all of us have a sense of obligation or duty to not only current generations of folks that live in Wyoming, but future generations as well. And I think all of us take that duty very seriously, and that's a core part of how we operate and how we make decisions is to consider not only current but future generations as well. In terms of, from a law enforcement perspective, I think as a law enforcement officer, former law enforcement officer, you do have a duty and obligation to the law of the land. The presentation by Ryan earlier did a great job of talking about criminal law, how laws are created by the legislature. Legislators are voted in by all of us as voters. And once that law of the land is in place, you are morally duty obligated to enforce and operate within that legal structure. So.
Yeah, I'll just close out by saying I felt like most of my career was I was never on the research side of it. Probably never smart enough to be like Martin. So I always felt my role was to take those laws and regulations and then help apply them in the field so that people followed them, help them color within the lines. And so I always kind of felt that was my role, whether it was through enforcement or through education or through just having a conversation, just sharing knowledge about wildlife and then helping people color within the lines, as I always felt was my role.
Thank you. So now we're going to transition a little bit into some talk about C.J. Box's novels and Joe Pickett. Hopefully I don't catch any tomatoes getting thrown at us up here, but just got a couple questions for you guys regarding that. So the first one I had was basically C.J. Box's Joe Pickett is often portrayed as a principled but conflicted individual. How accurate do you feel like that portrayal is of ethical dilemmas individuals in your profession face in the field? What does he get right, and are there areas where there might be a creative license taken in certain instances?
Well, when Rick was the chief, I would not say what I was going to say now because he would probably say that's not how you're supposed to do it. But, I think there is some conflict there because a lot of times there's the letter of the law and there's the intent of the law. And so I've always tried to apply what the intent of the law is. Like Rick said, we have this obligation to enforce the law. But there's times that people make a mistake and there's other ways to enforce the law that doesn't require writing a ticket. You can write a warning, or you can just give a verbal warning, or you can try to educate and teach them a different way to do it. And so what I've always tried to do through my career is what's going to gain compliance for me, and how am I going to act in order to gain compliance moving forward. And sometimes you have to let somebody go because you're hoping that that's going to buy some favor in the future. So me personally, and each of us have a different approach to this, but me personally, I never want to write a kid a ticket because usually there's an influence from a parent there. Kids aren't making decisions on their own when they're breaking the law. That's an influence from a parent. So if I can have a different influence, point them in the right direction, give them a break, and say, here's how we need to do it in the future, here's how we need to move forward, one, maybe I can get parents back on the right track. But two, that kid's going to come hunting again and say, well, last time I made a mistake, the game warden was pretty fair with me. Where if I take the other approach and are heavy-handed right off the bat, then that's what they're going to remember, is that I made a mistake one time and the game warden showed up and he was a real jerk. And so I don't like Game and Fish, and I don't care about their funding. I don't care about what they think or their philosophy. And so there can be that line of, here's what the law says, but how are we going to apply that, using some discretion and making sure that we do what's right for the person and for wildlife.
Yeah, maybe I'll just take a little different approach to the question and talk about some of the dilemmas that Joe Pickett faces in his novels. And one common theme that I think, again, is very accurate is that dilemma of duty to the job and duty to self and family. And Joe Pickett struggles with that a lot. And I can tell you from experience, both personal experience and watching game wardens, that's a very real dilemma and struggle. It's tough to feel like you are doing your duty and doing your job and meeting the needs of the public, but it's also tough to do that and take care of a family and meet those obligations and duties and responsibilities. That's a very real dilemma, and you capture it very well in your books.
Yeah, so when people ask me if I've read the latest Joe Pickett novel, their next question is Joe Pickett, is he that straight-laced? And he's pretty straight-laced. But being around game wardens my whole career, growing up hunting and being scared to death of a game warden when I was young, thinking I was going to do something wrong. And I had great parents, so my parents taught me right, but sometimes kids do stupid things. So there was always that fear when I saw a game warden, and just in the back of my mind, did I sign my license? So there's that, and being around those game wardens now, yes, they have that moral dilemma every day, and they're very, they take their job incredibly seriously. They take laws and regs very seriously, and I know I couldn't have gone down that path. I'd have made a terrible game warden because I'd have let everybody off. They're wired differently, and there's a reason why they are wired differently, because they have to make some really hard decisions. Most of the time, people are not going to be happy, but they're doing their job, and they're doing it to protect our resources and the laws and ethics that legislation passed. So I think, Mr. Box, you captured him. He did do a really good job of portraying a game warden.
What is one area of the profession that you would want to see explored in a future C.J. Box novel? Or what has been your favorite area of the profession that has been explored already in a previous book? And for Martin specifically, if C.J. were to write a wildlife biologist character to work with Joe, how would you want that person to be portrayed? What issues would you be most interested in being focused on?
First of all, he'd look really, really cool. I do know that. He'd have a mullet, and no.
He'd have a Metallica intro.
Metallica
every time,
shirt
right?
underneath his red shirt. He'd have. No, that's a great question. As biologists, we're trying to do the best thing we can to determine what our populations are doing, and what's going on not only in the natural resource world, but every world, is technology just advances at a very fast-paced speed, and us trying to keep up with that is difficult, but we try to do our best. So, if you're able to use drones the way we really like to use drones, we really can't use drones how you can use a drone just because of FAA regulations. And so he would have a drone mounted on the top of his pickup as he's driving down the road, listen to some good music, and really embracing and using that technology, because technology has changed how we manage our populations significantly. We have some very, very smart folks on our department. They're called Science Research and Analytical Team that takes that technology a step above what we've done even 10 years ago. So somehow technologies would be tied in there.
I think it's time you ought to promote Joe Pickett to the chief game warden and devote an entire novel to the life in Cheyenne instead of just criticizing those guys down there. That's it.
I got nothing. But you're welcome to come and sit with me in the office anytime.
That's perfect. So, building upon the Joe Pickett theme of this afternoon, one common tension that we see a lot in the Joe Pickett series revolves around the conflict between state-level law enforcement and federal agencies. In real life, how has this dynamic played out in your careers? Do you see a similar jurisdictional tug-of-war that some of the books emphasize?
I'll start off this one. I think from the field level perspective, we work really great with our partners. We work regularly with the Forest Service, we work regularly with the Fish and Wildlife Service and with the BLM. And that field level relationship, the wardens in that community and the biologists and rangers that work for those different federal agencies, we get along really great. When you get further up, that's when more dispute happens, right? So different philosophies, different approaches, and trying to work through those can be challenging. But from a daily look at it, it's always interesting to see that even when the top people completely disagree and we can't come to a decision, the people on the ground work really well together.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. We have a really good working relationship with our federal partners at the local level. We're truly blessed.
So earlier, Martin discussed a little bit about technology, and I want to talk a little bit about the technological advancements that are changing every field, not just law enforcement, but every field around the world at the moment. So technology has been rapidly evolving over the past decade with tools such as night vision, thermal vision, drones, as we previously discussed, and body cameras becoming much more commonplace than in prior years. How do you anticipate that these technological advancements will affect your day-to-day jobs? And have you had any conflict with these as of yet? And are these tools that you plan to use in the future? It's more of a three-part question. Just kind of feel free to attack it or take any angle you want on it.
These guys can dive into night vision and those kinds of laws and regs. But as far as technology, as I mentioned before, there are so many amazing tools out there that we're just trying to figure out how we can use them to the best of our abilities efficiently, get the proper training. Drones rise to the top. We have a drone committee within the department. We're always trying to figure out how we can collect data. So my job is mainly, as a field biologist, was collecting data. And we sometimes aren't very smart or safety conscious how we do that. We use helicopters, we use airplanes, we put people in these machines and we're using them probably not how they're intended to be used, to try to count one more deer, or find one more elk when it's blowing 60 miles an hour and it's miserably cold. So if we can use technology and not put people up in the air, that's my goal at the end of the day. Is I want our folks safe, but I also want to still be able to collect the data, and the technology's there to do that, and we just need to somehow capitalize on it.
Yeah, so from the enforcement side, all those technologies are always rapidly evolving, and it seems like the public is usually ahead of us. So maybe that's monetarily, or just because there's the next cool gadget that somebody's got to try out. If you think back like 20 years, maybe a little longer than that, but nobody had an ATV when they went hunting. So everybody had a four-wheel drive truck, and they would go as far as a truck could take them, and then they went out and they walked from there. And then, ATVs came along, and that kind of took everybody by surprise, because before long, every hunter had an ATV, and they were going all kinds of places that people couldn't get to before. And so, then you're trying to catch up on rules and regulations on how do you regulate that. And now there's e-bikes, and e-bikes go all kinds of places that people never would expect to see e-bikes. And I know in the few years I spent horseback, my horse loved seeing an e-bike. That was very exciting for all of us. So, that technology is rapidly evolving, and night vision and thermal, that's kind of the new craze right now. And I look in the Cabela's catalog and I see that you can buy a night vision scope for your rifle for $6,000, and it's like, wow, who has that kind of money? But people do, and so then we try to play catch up. And what tools can we give our game wardens so that they can help enforce laws around those? And so we're always a little bit behind. Wyoming's great because we're always a little bit behind anyway, and that's where we want to be. We don't want to be one of the busy states that has no public land left and doesn't have hunting like what we have it. I mean, you come to Wyoming and you're a resident here, you can buy an elk and a deer tag across the counter. You go to other states and you're lucky to get drawn every 5 years. And so what we have here is great, and we want to keep it that way. And so we're always going to play catch up. There was just recently a study that only about 5% of wildlife violations are detected. I think Boone and Crockett did it. They did a study through about 8 different states, and then they try to extrapolate that across. And so we hope in Wyoming we're a little further ahead than that. But you think about all the wildlife crime that happens that we can't detect. And a lot of that's due to technology, whether it's cameras or whether it's thermal. It's very hard for us to regulate all that stuff and then enforce it. There's only so many of us to go around. And so I think we're always going to be trying to play that catch-up game, and hopefully we can continue to give our wardens in the field the tools that they need. And so far, we've done really well in Wyoming. We've tried to give our wardens what they need to do their job and try to keep up with that technology.
Yeah, just to add real quick, just a real-world example. It was back in 2018, we did a survey of resident hunters and their attitude towards technology, hunting technology. We presented that to the commission. The commission gave us direction to go talk to the legislature to get some expanded authority to regulate some of that technology that the public told us they don't support in terms of fair chase hunting. And so we did that, and I think that effort was really good. But then I think it was just 2 years ago, the legislature came back and modified that technology use a little bit, and they expanded the opportunity and allowed folks to use night vision, thermals, to hunt predatory animals basically across the state, including public lands. And I remember trying to testify in the legislature that I didn't think that was a good idea. And when you're representing the department, you have to be kind of careful how you present yourself in your case to the legislature. I tried my dangest to tell them not to pass that, but they still passed it. And like Dan said, it just creates more work for our field wardens, and it's more difficult for us to tackle the job. As a result of that, we bought night vision and thermal equipment for our game wardens, but it's an added workload on folks that are already overburdened.
Thank you. Kind of dovetailing off of what you were just discussing there, what is one thing that you would want members of the legal profession to understand about your job that you feel like people don't quite understand? And this can be lawyers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and also members of the state legislature. Just what is it that you wish people in that profession understood more about your roles?
The one thing that comes to mind for me is that for us, a poaching case would be like a detective in a big city getting a big murder case. And the effort that our wardens put into investigating that and the time they spend trying to prove, we don't have all the technology that maybe a detective in Chicago has to try to solve a crime. So we're trying to piece all the evidence together from a dead animal on the ground and pour your heart and soul into that, and then you go to a county attorney, and then they get to decide whether or not they're going to prosecute that. And I got to visit with one during lunch, and that's a hard decision. And even the speaker before lunch talked about that discretion, that how do they decide who's going to prosecute something and who's not. And so I guess I've always had really great prosecutors that I've got to work with, but I know of other wardens that have had really rough prosecutors to work with. And so if they understood the time and effort and passion and just how much of your heart and your soul you pull into trying to solve wildlife crime and protect wildlife, maybe they would understand why we are the way we are. And then, you do all that work and it turns out to be a misdemeanor and they get a $250 fine or whatever it is. And so that's really challenging for us because it doesn't raise to the level. If I'm somebody who's a trophy hunter, and I'm making a big, broad stereotype here, but in general, if I'm a big trophy hunter and I have the money to come here and buy licenses and whatever equipment I have to do all that, and you're going to find me $250, that's lunch. So what? I got away with it. So finding ways to make the penalty for the crime actually meet the crime that we feel it is.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with Dan. He brought up the point that most wildlife crimes, not just in Wyoming, but across the country, are misdemeanors. And so if you're a prosecuting attorney and you have a massive workload and you're sorting through where you're going to spend your time, misdemeanors don't rise to the surface. But in a place like Wyoming, where wildlife has such high value, I would just encourage you to find a way to make it so that those misdemeanor cases can rise to the top, because the value of some of the wildlife that's being taken illegally in a lot of regards should be felony level, but it isn't. The second thing I would suggest is that if you're unfamiliar with natural resource law or wildlife law, go find your local Joe Pickett and spend a day with them and go ride around with them in the green truck. Just make sure you pack a lunch and dinner. And don't tell your Mary Beth that you're going to be home at a certain time, because you're not going to be. And then lastly, Dan mentioned the Boone and Crockett report. And that is a really great piece of work that's very recent. And it does talk about some of the barriers to prosecuting wildlife crimes and some of the things that might be done to help elevate the status of wildlife crimes in different places. So I'd encourage you to seek out that report and spend some time. There's some good information in there.
Sweet, thank you for that. One thing I want to go in that same vein is, if you could change one statute or regulation in wildlife or natural resource law, what would you change? What would you change and why? And for Martin specifically, do you think that wildlife statutes and regulations keep up with the pace of new data, or does policy frequently lag behind science?
Policy's fun, yeah. Yeah, trying to get those two to work together, that seems to be what I found is the trick, is what is good policy for wildlife? How can we help shape that, form that, as either legislators are forming new state statutes or passing bills, or our commissioners coming up with new regulations? How do those go hand in hand? In the speed of government, we were usually way behind. To be honest, that's just the way it is. But it doesn't mean we're not going to stop trying to keep those things going at the same pace.
What's one law I'd like changed? I saw that. I guess maybe I kind of touched on that before, is trying to fit the penalty with the crime. And there's a nice balance there, and I'm going to talk in a circle here because I'm going to go the other way now, because I also don't want the penalty to be so severe that when somebody makes an honest mistake that the penalty is overwhelming, right? So we want the penalty to apply to those who abuse the law. So if somebody's a habitual poacher, and we are lucky enough, I'll sidetrack a little bit, we are lucky enough, we do have a felony poaching statute, but you gotta be convicted 3 times for a pretty gross poaching violation. It's a wanton destruction, so it's not like accidentally shooting something during season. It's like I'm killing something on winter range out of season. I get caught 3 times for that, I can be charged as a felon. Those are the guys that we really want to prosecute to the fullest extent, to raise that to that felony level and make that happen. We don't want to make laws so stringent that the 14-year-old that's hunting for the first time accidentally shoots 2 because one fell down and then another one jumped up and he shot that one too. We don't want the penalty to be severe enough that person doesn't do the right thing. And so it's that balance. But just trying to figure out on the true poachers, as I like to say, making sure that the penalty for them truly fits the crime and that they truly have to pay the price for what they've done.
Well, I think the next discussion is about the Endangered Species Act. So I brought a list of stuff that I think you smart lawyer types ought to address with the ESA. And most of these none of these are my idea, but I think there's several parts of the Endangered Species Act that could be adjusted. For example, in 1978, they made an amendment that created this distinct population segment verbiage, which is not a biological concept, it's a legal concept. And really, it's only been applied to list species, but trying to apply it to delist species is really problematic. And I think that needs to be addressed. Having spent a lot of years working on grizzly bear recovery issues, which Dan is doing now, that distinct population segment language in there is problematic. And it needs to be addressed so that it can be used to delist, not just list. There's a provision in the ESA that allows for folks to recoup their attorney's fees. And the language in there is pretty vague in terms of the discretion that a court can use to refund or allow for the recoupment of attorney's fees. And really, I'm retired now, so I can be a little more blunt, but that's just become kind of the business model for some entities to use, is they can sue, and it doesn't matter whether they really don't have to reach a very high bar in terms of what their suit actually did, yet they can still recover attorney's fees, and it becomes this endless cycle that really is counterproductive to collaboration, which is really what is needed for long-term conservation of wildlife. So there's that dichotomy there that you're encouraging folks to just sit there and fight rather than come to the table and work together on conservation issues.
Thank you. So we're coming down to the very end of the panel here before we transition to a 15-minute Q&A with the audience members. But before we do that, I have one final question that I wanted to ask you guys. If wildlife could give out citations to people, what kinds of crazy citations do you think that they would be giving out to people based on your experience? Or, if you can't think of anything, what's the craziest wildlife story that you have?
So if an animal could write a ticket to a person, I think during the spring when all the babies are on the ground and people are rescuing them, I think Mama Deer would say, you get a ticket for stealing my baby, and you get a ticket for stealing my baby, and you get a ticket for stealing my baby. So that would probably be what citations Deer would write, or elk.
I'll do my craziest story and let Rick cover on that. As a biologist, you get called out to do some, and game wardens too. Well, we respond to some crazy calls. One of the craziest in my tenure is I was working over by Springer. It's a little town by Hawk Springs, and I got a phone call, and this gentleman says, "Hey, I found a mountain lion, and it's on this cliff, and it won't leave." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you leave, and it will leave?" And he's like, no, you don't understand. We saw this morning, and it's still there, and it will not leave. I'm like, this is not going to be fun. But I knew the gentleman. He's a local where I live, and that's probably one of the key things you learn is you need to maintain and build good relationships with your local constituents. So all right, I'll come out there. Well, he goes, it's at Gray Rocks. Gray Rocks is a big reservoir. So I drove an hour and a half extra, got to Gray Rocks, and he's in his boat. I'm like, what are you doing in your boat? Well, I'm going to take you to this mountain lion. I'm like, oh my, okay. I'm still not tracking. So I get in the boat with his daughter and granddaughter. Takes me across. If anybody's ever been to Gray Rocks, we went by the dam, and by the dam, there's the cliffs. There's these limestone cliffs. And right in the middle of this cliff was this little teeny cut-out space, and sure enough, there's this mountain lion there. And I have no idea how that mountain lion got there. It'd been there all day. And I had the daughter and granddaughter looking at me like, what are you going to do? Like, well, I've got to do something. It's probably going to be wrong, but I'm going to do something. So I proceeded to dart it, fell asleep, and then I didn't realize I'm not a very good rock climber. I tried to climb up from above. I couldn't do that. So I tied a rope to a piece of mahogany from up above, and in my first step going over a cliff, I'm like, I'm going to fall. So I abandoned that immediately. Went back down, and the daughter says, I'll give you a boost. And so I get on his daughter's shoulders, and she's giving me a boost, and I about fall there, and I'm like, this isn't going to work. So I call the game warden. I'm like, hey, David, I need a ladder, and you need to come to Gray Rocks ASAP. And it's dark. Now it's dark. He comes here with this ladder, and he's like, what are we doing? I'm like, trust me, you'll see when we get there. So we go back out there, dart the lion again, falls asleep. get the ladder there, climb up, tie him to the lion with the rope to bring it back down. We brought it back down. We both got in the boat, bring it up, and the lion wakes up. And I didn't use enough drugs. So, and it proceeds to grab David by his snap on his pants. And David Ellsworth is a very, very calm man. And he goes, "Hey, it's biting me." Like, yeah, you're right, David. Let's. So we made fast tracks to the shore, reversed the drugs, and let the lion free, and the lion walked off. So it was a crazy night. We got home about midnight. But as biologists and game wardens, we deal with a lot of death, to put it bluntly. We have to put down a lot of animals, and it's not very fun. And this is the one day where I felt like I won. So that's my story.
Yeah, that's tough to follow. I don't have anything that great, but I was thinking, as Martin was talking about, we, as game wardens and biologists, we deal with a lot of critters in town, and I remember being a regional wildlife supervisor in Laramie, so Cheyenne was my responsibility, and we got a call from the Cheyenne office that there was a moose down in the Capitol wandering around the Capitol lawn, and I thought, oh no, this is not good. This is going to be a tough day. But we called the troops. I think actually, were you part of that, Martin? So luckily, we have phenomenal people like Martin, and we gathered the troops, we gathered the equipment, we had good trained folks. We went down there, and sure enough, here's this moose running around the Capitol lawn, and we were able to dart it, pull a horse trailer up, load it in a horse trailer, reverse the drug, get it out of there, take it over to the Sierra Madres, and turn it loose. And the story has a happy ending, just like Martin's. But I think about those kind of events frequently, how bad they could have gone, but luckily, good folks, good training, good equipment, we get it done. So,
Thank you. Can we just get a big round of applause for them? So now we're going to transition just to a little bit of audience Q&A here. So I'm going to bring up a computer, and if any, just raise your hand and shout out a question, and we'll get started from there. Your hand is up, or no? Yeah. You? Yeah.
Yeah, where are we at with chronic wasting disease? So our commission passed a plan back in 2020 that outlines how we will try to manage this disease into the future. If anybody doesn't know about chronic wasting disease, it's a wicked disease. It's in the members of the deer family, and there's no cure. They're going to die. Once they get it, they die. And we've seen this slowly. It's a slow-moving disease. Another disease you might have heard of is blue tongue. Blue tongue is a very fast-acting disease. Animals die rapidly overnight in the fall from this a virus. Well, this is not a virus. It's not a bacteria. It's an abnormal-shaped protein called a prion, and it's a horrible disease. And all the research has shown there's no silver bullet for managing disease. And to complicate things worse, mule deer numbers are down, and of course everybody wants to see more mule deer. Well, one of the things we've learned through research and through other states trying things is having high densities of mule deer, there's more likelihood of passing these prions to the other members of the deer family. And so high densities are probably not a good thing when you're faced with a disease like CWD. So long story short, I'll get to your question, but it's a wicked disease, just to put it bluntly, and it's very hard to manage. And every biologist is tasked with working with their wardens to figure out how to manage CWD in the herds that they have the responsibilities for. And so it's a slow process here in Wyoming. We need the support of our constituents. In fact, in the plan, we cannot do anything without a local and broad public support. And quite frankly, the public is not supporting us on managing the disease right now because it goes against everything the public wants. They want more mule deer. And so not only is it a wicked disease, it's a wicked disease to manage. And so we're trying. We are taking small baby steps to try to reduce prevalences in herds where we can. I probably didn't answer your question, but that's.
So we got a question on Slido here that I wanted to ask you guys. As a chief game warden, what would you do if an employee destroyed as much equipment as Joe Pickett has?
I have that employee. Game wardens are notoriously hard on equipment. And part of that is justified. So we expect our game wardens to go to all kinds of places and all kinds of weather. And so equipment gets damaged and we try to do our best. But I will share a funny story because I had a technician working for me one time and he had a pretty beat up truck. And so we ended up, that truck got cycled out. I gave him a brand new truck and I said, this is a brand new truck. I know some of those dents were from you, from the last truck, and you kept saying that they were there when I got it, kind of thing. But this is a brand new truck. And so any dent moving forward is yours, and it's your responsibility. And he's like, oh, yeah, no problem. 2 weeks later, I get a call. Hey, I got this little bitty scratch. But I just wanted to make you aware of it. It's not a big deal. You probably don't even want to fix it. Not really a problem. And I said, well, I'll come and take a look at it, and we'll talk about it. Well, about 2 hours later, I get a call from the check station. Hey, what happened to so-and-so's truck? And I'm like, sounds like it's not a little scratch. No, it's got a great big hole in this side. So I went and looked at his truck. He had turned the corner on an icy alley in town as he was trying to find an injured deer and hooked the hook on the dumpster there and didn't stop. And so it creased a nice hole right down the bed. And that was his little bitty scratch that he didn't think I was even going to need to fix.
Perfect. So we have another question on Slido here, more from a student perspective. What recommendations would you have for current students studying wildlife biology to gain experience in the field?
Well, I think that riding along with our wardens would be my top recommendation. I think get out there, get exposure to what the job is, and then my second piece of advice would be finish your wildlife degree and then go to law school, because if you really want to do something good for wildlife in this day and age, you better have an attorney mindset. And so I seriously would encourage folks to take a hard look at wildlife law and go here at UW, where the program is phenomenal.
I could cover for if anybody's not wanting to be a lawyer or a game warden. Yeah, Rick said there's opportunities to ride along. Put yourself out there. That's probably the biggest thing. We take students every year from the wildlife program, and they come when I was in the Laramie region, we would take those students and expose them to the different job duties. Show up on time, bring a lunch, bring warm clothes, and be prepared to be up for a long day. If you can do those 4 things, you are well on your way to getting in this field.
Yeah, and I would just add, there's lots of jobs across our agency. So we have attorneys that work with us. We have business people that work with us. And so even if it's not to be a game warden or a biologist, know what the department is about and know what we do. I've endlessly been amazed by people who apply to be a game warden or a biologist, and then they really know nothing about our department or what we do. And so that's always really challenging to me. But there are opportunities to get your foot in the door, whether it's doing a job with fisheries. Even if you want to be a game warden, do a job with fisheries and get to know what fisheries does, and then you're going to meet people in the wildlife division. Or if you want to be a fish biologist, get a job either as a fisheries technician or as a wildlife technician. Learn about the agency. And Rick hit it on the head. Actually visit, our people are really good about wanting to share what they do, and most of them are open to taking people along. And so get to know who we are and what our agency does.
Professor Elliott.
The book, just in you guys' description, is that the job of the game warden is sort of all-consuming and difficult to balance, and with the new technology and everything, there's more ways for people to violate the law. And it just seems like there should be more game wardens, and they should have smaller territories that they are responsible for so that they can do their jobs better. So is it just that there's no money for that, or am I wrong about that?
No, that's spot on. We would love to have more game wardens. I can put you in touch with our governor. That would be great. You know, it is, and Rick touched on it a little bit. It is a challenge. So Rick used the firehouse analogy. I think of it more as like a rancher. You know, you feel so obligated to making everything work. And a rancher, they've got to take care of their place. They've got to take care of their livestock. And so if they leave for any period of time, somebody else has got to do that for them. In Wyoming, we assign a game warden and a biologist. We assign them to a district, and that's theirs. And so we create this culture of you're responsible for everything there. And Mr. Box really captures that in his book, the struggle that Joe Pickett has on feeling like he's got to work all the time and wanting to make sure he's taking care of everything. And so we really tried to, Rick did it through his tenure. I tried to do it in my tenure. We're trying to help people find that work-life balance because you're not available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You got to have some other things because every hour you spend working is 1 hour you're not with your family or not with your hobby or not with your church or whatever it is that you do on the side. And so trying to find that balance. But yes, more would help. But we also select for people that are very possessive of what they have and they want to take care of it. And so when you give them more help, they still work just as hard because they just care so much. And so it's more people would definitely help, but it's just the people that we hire, the passion that they have, and like Martin said, you're willing to show up on time and work hard and bring a lunch and dinner and maybe a few snacks. That's how you fit in with us.
Sweet. And with that, we are out of time. So there's still a few questions left in the Slido, and if you have a chance, just feel free to grab one of them on their way out and ask them your question. But fortunately, we're out of time. So can we just give these guys one more big round of applause?